Alright, a while back I had done a series of videos on creating planner tasks from a Microsoft form using Power Automate. And one of the questions that came in, because in the course of that, one of the properties for a task that is generally kind of important to set is a priority or importance level. Um, and in my previous video, I had done that using a choice column here with the number value. And the reason for that is that internally, that's how the data is stored. So from a programming standpoint, this is a lot easier. However, from an intuition standpoint, asking people to assign a number for the priority instead of simply saying high, medium, whatever the choices are in Planner, can be a little confusing, especially if they're people who are used to using Planner, because when they go into Planner, they don't see the priority as a number, they see it as a text value. But if we take a look at the actual documentation for the create a task action in the Planner connector, we can see that the priority is priority task valid ranges between 0 and 10, although I actually found it to be 1 and 10 because when I set it to 0 it seemed to ignore that, so maybe that's a bug. I don't know. It's still technically a preview action, so could be. But at any rate, the way I had set up the number scale there was to account for basically 1 to 4. Anywhere from 1 to 4 it would list, 0 or 1 would be urgent, so 1 would be urgent because 0 wasn't an option. 2, 3, and 4 would return important. 5, 6, 7 would be medium. 8, 9, and 10 would be low. Now, if you create a task from Planner and use the text values that are there, and then you examine that task using the get a task action in Power Automate, you'll find that it's actually internally setting those values to be 1 for urgent, 3 for important, 5 for medium, and 9 for low. So using this information, we can create a choice question on our form, create a table or an array in our flow to basically convert that text value that they're selecting from the drop down or radio buttons, whatever, into the appropriate number to feed into the task. So I've kind of already done most of this. I'm just going to paste in some actions, but I want to at least show you kind of how you would put this together. So back on our form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the edit view for this form and go to our importance, and here I'm going to this is actually a rating scale question. So what I'm going to do is we're going to delete this, say yes, and then I'm going to add a new question, which will be a choice question, and this will be priority. And if we jump over to Planner and we just take a look at when you create a new plan or a new task, I'll just call this task, and we edit it, the choices are urgent, important, medium, and low. Now you have the option of putting these in whatever order you want in that form, because essentially what we're going to do is match it back up to the appropriate number. However, I would suggest not putting urgent first, but rather put them in sort of the order that you want people to use them. Because if urgent is the first choice, a lot of people are just going to select urgent all the time for every task. So I would imagine most are going to be medium. So we'll actually put them in sort of the most used first, and then we'll go to important, urgent, low, because those are kind of the from my experience using Planner and watching people use Planner, those are the sort of the priority of the priorities, so to speak. So in our form here, we're going to make option 1 be medium, Option 2 will be important. Option 3 will be urgent. And option 4 will be low. Let me just double check myself there. Urgent, important, medium, low. But again, we're going medium, important, urgent, low. So we're just reordering them a little bit because psychologically people will want to select that first thing. And you don't necessarily want every task to be submitted as urgent. All right, so that's all we need to do here. Forms automatically save in the background, so I don't need to press save or anything over here. But I do need to now go into our flow, and we're going to edit this flow. It's the same flow I built in that other series, so you can take a look over there for that info. But in here, basically, just to kind of recap, we've got, I use scopes a lot to kind of categorize and just containerize flows to keep them a little more organized. So we've got a scope here, we're converting the dates, where we're assigning the task, blah, blah, blah. But down here, so we're sort of at the bottom of those existing scopes, that's where we're going to add our steps to handle those priorities. So the first thing I need to do is add in a create variable step. So we're going to create, or initialize variable rather. Initialize variable. And that's going to be var priorities. And that's going to be an array variable. Now you could probably also do this with a compose statement. I know that in many cases you can drop compose statements into, or drop arrays into a compose statement, and it's a little less, more performant that way, but I'm going with old school. Variables here. So we're just going to call this initialize var priorities. Now for the format of this array, basically we need name value pairs, because what we're getting in is text, and we need to really convert that text into a number. And I'm now thinking of a much easier way to do this, but we're going to plow through with this way because I think it gives you a better understanding. It's more useful. You'll use this in more places, but then we might go back and do the much easier way, which is using a switch. Anyway, let me continue on here. So now I do have this in another flow where I've got that var priorities, and this is the array that we're going to, let me just copy that and go back here and plug that in. So basically this is JSON format. We have a square bracket to open the array, curly brace for around each object in the array. So it's an array of objects, and then each object has a priority property and a value property. So the priorities are going to match up to the choices. So whatever are listed as the priority names here need to match those choices on your form. So you could even come up with your own names for them, color codes, whatever you want, as long as they match, and then they match the corresponding number. So we saw over here that when it's using 9 for low, so my flow for low, we're using a value of 9. Now you'll notice that I don't have quotes around the number here, and that's because it's an integer value. It's a number value. You don't need the quotes. It's not a string, it's a number. So you're perfectly fine leaving it without the quotes. So if you put the quotes, it might change things a little bit, but I just don't use the quotes there. I'm lazy. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do. We got low is 9, medium is 5, importance 3, and urgent is 1. All right, so that is our priorities array, and then we need to add in another action. I'm just going to paste in from my clipboard a scope called handle properties, and then we'll take a look at what's inside that. So really we're doing two things in here. We are first filtering that priorities array, so that variable. We're filtering that to where the priority, and just to show you how I got that in there, because if you go into, so we're filtering var priorities, and then if we go into dynamic content, you will not find, you'll find the whole var priorities, but that doesn't really work, because what you need is to get is basically tell it what field, what property in that array you want to compare. And the way we do that is using the item expression. So we want to find the item, and this is a notation that you probably want to become familiar with if you're going to use Power Automate. It makes a lot of things easier. So we're going to go with item, open and close parentheses, question mark, square brace, or sorry, square bracket, single quote, and inside of that, priority. Because that, if we go back up here, this is what we're matching. We're matching that priority property in the array to what was selected on the form. And now, because I clicked away, we need to enter that again. So let me do that again. Question mark, square brace, square bracket, whatever, priority. Click OK. And then we want to match that against what they submitted or what they selected on the form, which I'm going to get from the priority answer on the form. Because it's a single select choice question, the answer just comes in as text. So we're good, we're clean. We don't need to worry about converting or anything. It's just going to be perfect for what it is. All right. So now we're going to filter that var priorities array for the the priority is equal to the priority selected on the form. So far, so good. And then, because what this is doing, when you filter an array, you're getting an array that is just been filtered. So it's still in an array format. And what we want to get is specifically the ID or the value of that. So basically this is operating on the, what we're going to get is, or what we're going to look for is we're going to select from the array produced by that filter array action. And then again in here, now normally when you create the select, you've got this key value, and the trick, this is something that a lot of people aren't aware you can do, is to click here, because normally you need to say I want this property and this name. But if you click here, then you can give it sort of a primitive value. It's just a value to get. But again, you need to know the expression, the item expression syntax to do that. So we're going to do item question square bracket value. Okay. And then when you select that, because this filter could in theory produce more than one output, more than one record, more than one object. And I mean, in practice, in this flow, it can't, but in other cases, it might. So the output of this select is also going to be an array. So when we want to set that priority in our create a task action here, I'm going to go to the priority field, and this is what we had before. We had the int expression to convert that number that was coming in to an integer value. But now what we need is a first expression, because again, that select statement is still producing an array. So what we want to do is get the first value of the array, and we'll just say first, and then go to our dynamic content and select from var priorities, click output, click OK, hit save, and then let's go give this take this for a test drive. So I'm going to preview my form. I'm going to say this is a low priority task for the management team. It's going to start on June 6th and be due by June 9th. Something not too important. And we'll say that's low. And I'm going to leave those blank and hit submit. And we're going to jump straight over to our plan here because I'm confident that's going to work. And let's refresh the page. Hey, there's our low priority task in the management bucket. So, all right, let's just, to be sure we got the other end, let's create another one, which will be urgent, and we'll call this an urgent task for the research group. And let's say that starts on Wednesday and is due Friday. It's a super urgent task. Urgent. And submit. Okay, that where did that go? Because it shows that it ran. Did it run? It ran. It created a task called an urgent task. Oh, it's the research bucket was off the screen there. There it is. There's our urgent task. So, yeah, just look for those scroll bars and scroll when you need to. So there we go. That's how we could do this with an array and with a couple, the filter array action and the select action. But as I said, I thought of, as I was recording this, thought of an easier way to do this. So let's just talk through that. And that's basically using a switch. Switches are something that I think are not terribly utilized or they're not very often utilized when they should be. A lot of people tend to build these really hideous, redundant or iterative conditions. So they use conditions when they should be using the switch action. So basically, without going into details, the switch action acts on a single value from an input and then says if the value is this and it's strictly an equal to, you can't do like within a range or greater than, less than, etc. It's strictly equal to. So this is actually an ideal use case for it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to edit this tab, edit the flow. We're not going to change our form at all. We're going to leave that exactly as it is. But what I'm going to do is in this handle, we're going to take these var priorities. I'm going to change it from an array to an integer. And then I'm just going to blank all that out. So we're going to set it to no value whatsoever. Then in here, we'll just delete this scope because we don't need either of those actions anymore. But we are going to add a switch. So type in switch, and here we go. Now, basically, when you add a switch, it's saying on, and it means basically what value, what input are you evaluating, and then stating, the outcome or determining the path. So we're going to go to the priority from our form, and we're going to say if the priority is low, then you can set variable, and the variable we're going to set is var priorities, and we're going to make that, what was low, 9. All right, so that's going to be 9. And then what we need to do is add a case for each of the other priorities. So we've got low, we've got medium, and in the event of medium, we're going to, you know what, let me just copy that and Is one of the problems with select sometimes, or switches rather. Sometimes when you try to paste in these cases, it doesn't really work. So let's try this again. So, set variable. Yeah, I'm not sure why it is. I'm sure it's just a bug of some kind, but in this case, we'll set priority to it was 5 for medium. And then we're going to repeat for the other two cases. So this will be important, and again, we'll set variable. So for our priorities to 3. Okay. And then finally, actually, we don't need this because really we're giving them 4 choices, and we've just defined the first 3. So the default here is basically if the if the value that's coming in doesn't match any of those 3, this is what it does by default. So you don't actually need to say urgent. We just need to say if it's not one of those 3, then we'll set that variable to set var priorities to 1. All right. So you can tell this is a little switches. One problem with switches is that they're ugly. That you kind of end up with these very wide. It's going to lay all those out. Now if I click here, it'll collapse them down, but once you open those to examine it, it's kind of unwieldy to do. There's a lot of scrolling involved, which is one of the reasons that I think I don't use them as often as I do, just because they're a little clumsy to edit. But that's basically what we're going to do. So basically we'll initialize the variable as an integer, leave it blank, and then down here in the creating a task, it becomes, the syntax becomes a little bit easier because we don't need to do first, because what we're getting, essentially this switch is converting that text value into the appropriate number. So all we need to throw in here is var priorities. So if I hit save, and we'll go back and test this again, and we did a low and an urgent, so let's do a submit another one. We'll say this is a medium priority task for operation. We'll make it for research, and it'll be next Monday to next Wednesday. I'll say medium duty stuff, and we'll say medium, submit, and go over here. And then there's our medium priority task. And likewise, if I were to say an important task for operations, be Thursday, and do next Tuesday, something kind of important. So I'll say important, submit, and there's our important task. So yeah, there you go. That is pretty much one of the shows. So we showed first how to do it, kind of the more complicated way to set up, but the little, more potentially cleaner way to deal with it, and also more scalable, because if that choice had 10 values, you don't necessarily want to go and create 10 cases. That would be really tedious. So for something like 4 choices, a switch is kind of, the same effort to do it with a switch versus doing it with an array. But it's good to know both methods, because there's everything you'll learn in Power Automate is that There are very few cases where there's the best way to do it. There's always going to be more than one way to do something. So it's important to understand that there are options and how to exercise those different options and know which one is kind of best for your particular situation. So in this case, with only 4 values, a switch would work just as well as using the array. But if you need a choice value or choice question with a dozen choices, it would be really cumbersome to build this. Whereas building that array and filtering it and selecting the value would be much simpler in the long run. So hopefully this is useful to you. If you have any questions, throw them in the comment down below. But otherwise, enjoy and have a great day.